think about Hitler's foreign policy, I can't help but be reminded of a popular game that was on television called The Price is Right. And one of the games that was on the show was called Mountain Climber. And during the show, persons had to guess a price. And as they got higher and higher in the price, they would get to the edge of the cliff, and then all of a sudden, if they went over, they would fall. In some ways, Hitler's foreign policy is like that mountain climber, heading towards 1939 when war would eventually break out. Hi everyone, this is Mr. Trio, and today we are taking a look at why had international peace collapsed by 1939, and I am calling this episode Road to War. This focus point is our third one, which is how far was Hitler's foreign policy to blame for the outbreak of war in 1939. Now, when we look at Hitler's foreign policy objectives, I think that they fall into nice categories. For example, he was opposed to the Treaty of Versailles, so a lot of the policies that he promoted and were popular at the time were directly trying to destroy what the treaty represented. There was also a strong foreign policy initiative in order to unite all German people together. So throughout Europe, not only in Germany, but Austria and the Czechoslovakia and other areas, there were German people living, and Hitler believed very strongly that all German people should live together. Then there was the issue of communism. Hitler was directly opposed to communism. And a lot of this, of course, deals with his domestic policies of destroying the Communist Party in Germany, but it also had a lot to do with foreign policy as well, where he will support governments that fight communism. There is also his desire for more land for German people, and then finally, Hitler's foreign policy was directly related to him creating a new empire for Germany, a great empire which he called the Third Reich. Now, our book does a very nice job of sort of outlining different policies in his early period, starting when he became the leader in 1933. And you can go through and you can say, well, when Germany refuses to pay reparations, this was clearly a policy that was aimed at the Treaty of Versailles. When he meets with the Polish people, he is trying to divide his enemies so he will not be attacked. Hitler is eyeing more land for Germany in Poland at this time. When he attempts to unite with Austria in 1934, this is all about uniting German people. And the Tsar, that plebiscite that's returned in 1935, that's also about uniting German people. When he reintroduces the military draft, making it mandatory for young German men to serve in the military, that is a clear violation of the Treaty of Versailles. And then finally, when the Anglo-German naval agreement takes place, what he is trying to do is essentially rebuild the German Navy, including submarines, which was one of the conditions of the Treaty of Versailles. So, as you look at the book and look at each of these events in more detail, try to peg specifically what the event is and how it's related to the larger foreign policy initiatives that Hitler had in mind. Now, between 1936 and 1938, this is when Hitler's foreign policy becomes far more aggressive. And this is where you can see, or actually begin to see, how he is directly pushing Germany towards war, or eventual war. He begins to remilitarize the Rhineland in 1936, violation of the Treaty of Versailles. He supports Franco in his civil war in order to fight the communists there. It was also an opportunity for the Germans to practice new techniques in battle, specifically with their aircraft. In 1936, he forms alliances with Japan and Italy. This is also an important move to fight against the Soviet Union and communism, but it's also sort of the prediction of who will align itself when the Second World War begins. By 1938, Austria and Germany do unite together into one nation, which is an event known as Anschluss, and this is uniting German people. And then 1938 also, this is when Germany essentially takes over the Sudetenland, an area of the Czechoslovakia in which a large percentage of the people who were living there were German people. Let's take a look specifically at this particular event. Now, the Munich Agreement is perhaps one of the most important in the 1930s, which is sort of this test for the League of Nations, and specifically a test for Great Britain to keep Hitler under control. In September of 1938, it is first discussed that the Sudetenland should be given to Germany because these were German people who were mainly living in this area of Czechoslovakia. Just a few days later, Hitler demands that this area should be given to Germany. And essentially, this strong language on the part of Hitler, bringing this to everyone's attention, prompts the Munich Conference, in which members of Great Britain and other nations go to Germany to discuss how this situation can be handled. And one of the things that happens is that Great Britain gets assurances from Germany that they will keep the peace if this land is given to Germany. And Great Britain agrees, and essentially this part of Czechoslovakia is given to Germany. Now we're going to talk in the entire next video about this policy of appeasement and why Great Britain would essentially allow Hitler to have this area. But I think for the purposes of this video, it's important to think about how Hitler is testing the world. He is making incremental steps, more and more aggressive, to see what he can get away with in order to push his foreign policy objective to make Germany great again. The aftermath, of course, of this particular conference is that Britain realizes that war is inevitable, and that essentially at this time, this is when Great Britain and France begin to prepare for the eventual war that begins in 1939. So that's a really quick overview of this particular focus point. As I mentioned, the book does a very nice job of outlining each of the different events, so look at those more specifically. And when we're in class, we'll look at some political cartoons and some other sources in order to really start to understand what Hitler was trying to do in the 1930s in order to bring Germany back to greatness. Thanks a lot. We'll talk more in class. Thank you for watching.